Thank you for coming today to a lecture organized by AHEPA and specifically from Chapter Poseidon. AHEPA is divided in chapters, so for the people that don't know. We have a very interesting subject today that's going to be presented by one of our very own members. And I will make an introduction very, very soon. In the meantime, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land at which we are having this presentation today and pay my respects to their elders, emerging, past and present.
Γιάννη, το έχεις κλείσει το μικρόφωνο.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Yes. Oh, it's much better. Okay. I didn't want to be in front of the lecture. I wanted to be there. That's why I wanted that, but it doesn't work anyway. Okay. I would like to ask our President Philippos Toukakis to say a few words, and we'll get on with it. Philippos.
Thank you, Grand Director of Ceremonies.
Γιάννη.
Vice President.
And Vice President.
Γιάννη. Στο πρώτο slide βάλε. Πίσω. Όχι. Μπράβο.
No, just to say a few words only, thank you very much for coming. AHEPA is always an Educational Progressive Association, and I would like to call again soon to say a few words for our speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Philippos. Okay, so it's time to say who I am. My name is Ioannis Nikanidis. I am a member of Poseidon chapter of AHEPA, but I am also the Vice President of the State Council of Victoria. So we have organized this lecture today, and I would like to start saying, imagine a world where it's safe to do transactions on the internet. Imagine a world where it's absolutely safe to go on social media, use the internet, and do things online. Unfortunately, that's not the case, and that's why today we are having this lecture. I have the pleasure to present our very own Dimitrios Alabasis. He is an associate professor of emerging technologies and fintech capability lead at the Swinburne University of Technology. He is an award-winning and globally recognized thought leader, educator, researcher, and sought-after speaker. So we are very lucky today. I cannot emphasize that enough. Passionate about innovation and business strategy, global affairs and geopolitics, digital economy, which is fintech, sustainability, and emerging technologies nexus. He is regularly involved in international advisory work with leading private, public, and governmental stakeholders. He has a strong international thought leadership presence, publishing forward-thinking insights, points of view, and informative contributions in international peer-reviewed academic journals and books. That was a mouthful. His work is regularly presented in major international conferences, leading industry forums, knowledge networks, communities of practice, thank you, Joel, executive education masterclasses, and invited keynotes around the world. He is a trusted partner of C-level executives, CEOs, and board of directors of leading corporations, startups, policymakers, and government officials worldwide, helping them harness fintech and emerging technologies, shaping transformative strategies across business, government, and society. Before I welcome Dr. Dimitrios Alabasis on the stage, I would like to respectfully request that you take no photos of the slides. You can have them if you want by asking us to give them to you, to supply them to you. We will be posting snippets on Facebook after this event today. You can also ask Dimitri himself if you want for that. Finally, at the end, we will have refreshments in the back, so you're welcome to stay back and mingle a little bit. Okay, this is it. Dimitri, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you so much for the kind invitation. The topic is quite timely. It couldn't probably be more than timely. It's quite scary, and it's quite complicated. So within the next 45 minutes, I'm going to share with you a couple of insights around where is currently the world heading in relation to scams, fraud, deepfakes, voice cloning, all these technologies which basically are meant to do good, but unfortunately they've been used for illicit purposes. A few things around cyberbullying and particularly online harassment, especially focusing on youth, which is, in my opinion, one of the most vulnerable demographics nowadays. How do we create a play and critical and safe playground for children, youth, but for all of us, because none of us is excluded from this kind of situation? How can we create some sort of a personal hygiene routine and narrative and also ethos around protecting as much as possible ourselves, but also where things are heading? We live in times of digital revolution, so everything is happening digital. Every one of us is online. However, criminals are also online. That means the online world that we live in, the digital world that we live in, is also brings areas of cyber attacks, digital harm, and also online harassment. And these kind of risks have been mounting for a very long time. So that means it creates a massive problem at an individual, organizational, but also societal level. Part of these online issues are coming because of organized crime. So there are organized entities such as scam centers, such as lots of institutions around the globe that are actually doing this. They are trying to harm you online. And cybercrime, unfortunately, is real. It's here, it's happening now, and it's causing a massive cost with organizations, but also individuals. And cost cannot be only measured in numbers or in financial terms, but it needs also to be measured with psychological, ethical, and emotional parameters. This is what currently the world looks like. This is where the threat landscape of cybercrime is positioned. And as you can see, it cost approximately 10.5 trillion only within 2025. So we see a big puzzle of complexity, and later on I'm going to share more around what does this complexity look like and how difficult and how complicated this particular landscape is. One of the key issues we've been faced nowadays, especially because of the advent of emerging technologies, and particularly artificial intelligence, which is an amazing technology, but unfortunately it is also used for bad purposes, is that we all live in a new era of disinformation. And disinformation actually means the deliberate flow of fake, fabricated, non-genuine information online through different channels, mainly through social media. In order to do what? In order to create an illusion around what is real and what is not real, what is real news versus what is fake news. What is also quite alarming is not only the easiness of submitting and throwing out there all this piece of information, diffusing this, but is also the easiness of actually producing these pieces of information. Not sure how many of you have watched this following snippet, and you can tell me if I wouldn't tell you it's fake, if you would think it would be real.
Go on, punch.
So this particular video was all over the internet early 2025. What is scary though is the fact that it costs approximately $10 US to produce it, and it takes approximately 15 minutes using deepfake technology and particularly AI. So what does that mean? That basically everyone can, by using different types of programs, create similar videos, which it looks as if it's real. It's the realistic terms are really, really spot on. So imagine overflowing the internet with this kind of information, what kind of manipulation you create to the general population and what kind of wrong messages you deliberately want to get out of there. So this is part of the whole conversation around the cyber world we live in. What actually is real, what is not real, and how can you start distinguishing that? So these particular digital scams, fraud, disinformation, they're mounting. They're increasing a lot. And the direction, unfortunately, is quite uncertain. And basically, as I said before, we need to look at it into three dimensions. The individual dimension, so that means each and every one of us. At an organizational level, where we see institutions fighting with this kind of situations and risk, but also where does a society go in terms of, democracy, ethics, values, but also what is true in what we call a post-digital or even a post-truth society. We see hackers, we see fraudsters, very complicated entities, rogue regimes are becoming more sophisticated. Think about dark web, think about sanctioned entities, think about war crimes and crimes against humanity advocates, all of them using different channels, digital channels, to either diffuse information, to manipulate, but also create fraud and create illicit activities. What is also very critical to remember that as individuals, I'm sure we all have some sort of a digital presence, either through social media or our online behavior, through purchasing, through browsing news and all that. The moment we click something, either on our computers or our smartphones, we leave a digital footprint. And that digital footprint is a gateway to do what? To a hackable life. So by default, each and every one of us is potentially hackable. Another thing which is very scary, especially with the advent of generative AI, is the creation of fake ID cards and fake identities. Look at this. It looks amazing. It looks really real, but it's fake. So basically this has been created, this is a passport that has been created by using ChatGPT. So basically that means we are in an era where anything, any kind of image could be fake or could be used to create fake images. And that means documentation and the identity management itself is at risk, is in peril. So these forged documents could be used for each and every one of us to open bank accounts, to use them for any kind of illicit activities, and they have been used. Also to do what? To breach, but also to have different types of information that can be shared across or sold through different channels. An interesting example is when we see massive breaches due to cybersecurity incidents in big organizations. Think about Medibank, think about Optus and the likes. And the fact that the information, this piece of sensitive information, can be sold or can be found in dark web. And basically, that's why the cyber criminals are seeking for ransom, to be able to release this information back, which they don't actually do. So by default, all our information, mobile phone, date of birth, address, these are the more common ones, but we can see also biometrics. We can see information in relation to how behavioral patterns we have online through purchasing behavior, through clicks we use to check on news. All of these are hidden around and people can use them for different reasons. So therefore we live on times where all of this is new, so it's important to have new knowledge. We need to understand the mounting speed of technological advancements. Regulation and compliance is there to support and to protect, but it's not enough. But also it's about us being more responsible citizens and trying to co-live with technology and basically use it in a responsible and ethical manner. So therefore, all these illicit activities that are happening online call for online protection. And ultimately, this protection will come from each and every one of us. We need to be the ones who need to understand how to protect ourselves. So self-awareness and understanding is very, very key. These numbers look quite scary. This is only Australia in 2024, where we see the most famous or the most popular types of scams, and I'm going to talk a little bit later on each and every one of them. As you can see here, I'm only depicting the numbers. I'm only depicting the figures. But behind each and every one of these scams is a very tragic story of people who've lost their money, of people who lost their dignity, of people who have been left without anything, of people who have been fighting with organizations to get their money back. So that creates not only a financial burden, but it's actually a personal tragedy for each and every one of these people who have been scammed through different channels. So I'm sure, for example, you probably all have received a message like that, saying that you own money on a toll trip. Probably most of you have a car. I don't, but I still receive that. So for me, it would be impossible to own money on a toll trip that I never did because I don't even have a car. I'm sure you all have received probably such an email from the ATO saying that fiscal activity, you owe money, or money will be returned back to you. Look at the address here. Look how fake that address is. However, I'm sure 99% of you would probably go and click on that, because what drives us as human beings is impulsiveness. We don't think and we don't pay attention. So my first advice is whenever you receive any kind of message like this, and I'm going to show a little bit more, some additional ones, step back. Don't act immediately. Think, have I been on a road which required me to pay tolls? Is there any way that I should be even owning money? Am I expecting a parcel from the post office? Am I expecting any money from ATO? Has ATO ever reached out to me like this? 2 weeks ago, I was working at home and I received a call on my smartphone. Of course, a number there was a number there, and they said, "Hello, we're calling from Telstra. For the past few days, we have seen some very weird activity transmitted from your modem. Your internet is not secure. Please let us get back in making your internet feel more secure." So immediately, and of course, they pick specific times during the day. You'll probably be working, so you might be busy, you might be somewhere else, so you will be easily distracted. And of course, each and every one of us has internet access at home. The first red flag is that they didn't address me by my name. So normally, when a company calls you, a company that you are their customer, they would address you by your name. Secondly, they said that over the past few days, and by default, it started clicking on me that, "Hey, Con, I wasn't at home over the past few days. My modem was switched off. So how could it actually transmit this kind of information?" Thirdly, when they call you from a legitimate company, they wouldn't start bombarding you. They would start with a verification process. So they wouldn't start bombarding you to scare you. So this is where scammers come in. They will start bombarding with information to scare you, to make you feel intimidated. So what do you actually do? You simply hang up the phone first. Secondly, if you want a peace of your mind, call Telstra, call Optus, call your bank and say, okay, did you call me? Did you try to reach me? I reached out to Telstra through the chat channel that they've got through their app, which is legitimate. And they said, no, nobody reached you because we don't do that. So part of your self-awareness is also to understand when you are a customer of a particular organization is to know how your organization would reach out to you. Optus, how would they reach out to you? NAB, how would they reach out to you? Your water supplier, your ATO, would actually ATO ever send you an email like that? Probably not. Other information, Optus, here, another one, or NAB. Your NAB ID has been accessed from a device location, blah, blah, blah. Was it you call? Would they actually do that? They would do it in a different way and they would verify that in a different way. Or, here, another one. What you actually need to do, start chatting. Or, post, your parcel is currently being processed. Due to an invalid, I'm sure all of you have received that. I receive that all the time. All the time. So, when you immediately read this, you say, oh, you start panicking, but you start thinking impulsively. So take a step back, look at the details. Hang on, I'm expecting a post from anywhere? Would they actually reach out to me like that? Or why would they actually say Black Friday mega sale? Oh, it's okay, 50% off shop, latest details, shop now. You see, all of this is fishy. So this is very important. And here we start seeing, hopefully soon, when we receive this kind of calls, unverified overseas call, warning suspicious calling pattern, warning potential fraud. But it's not easy. So please pay attention, please be in alert, and please don't act impulsively. Another big pool where we see lots of scams, frauds, and all these activities, and again, I'm not going to generalize, but I'm just giving you the most prominent landscapes of activity, is social media. I'm sure you will all have social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and all that. What is scary is that young children particularly, even though they're meant to be the most tech-savvy ones, they're the most vulnerable ones. Because most of them, they suffer from one thing. They are really seeking for peer confirmation and peer verification from others. They suffer from anxiety, they suffer from depression, they suffer from an overflow of information, and what they want to avoid is FOMO, fear of missing out. So basically, these create a lot of issues. Social media has been considered by many as a youth mental health crisis around the globe. And basically, we see young people being exposed to content which can be harmful, which can be deceitful, which can be driven by racism, which can be driven by lots of other negative issues, and having causes with sleep, body image, physical activity, depression, and anxiety. And this is going to be getting worse. Another big landscape is dating apps. I'm sure most of us at some point, or probably the generation of mine and younger, they have been on a dating app or many dating apps. To do what? To find someone, to meet people, and half Australians between 18 to 49 are at least in one dating app or website. What is critical though is that lots of people have been experiencing harassment of abuse, which includes online sexual harassment, abusive or threatening language, image-based sexual abuse, and online stalking. This is actually quite scary because it means that people who use images, they can basically start blackmailing you. or online stalking. They start asking you questions to receive information, and then they start looking at you or chasing you. Gender-based violence, and we have seen that quite a lot also in Australia. 12.4 of Australian dating apps users have been asked by fellow users to facilitate child sexual exploitation. And these are data, these are real data. These are coming from very legitimate sources. So it's a real issue, especially for young people. You want to make things worse? Let's make things worse. This is David, Jack, and Elijah. Fantastic kids, amazing. One thing they have in common, unfortunately, the three of them are dead. Why? Because of sextortion scams. And what is a sextortion scam? Simply is the ability of fraudsters and scammers to utilize AI-generated images to blackmail, and also to threaten to put all these pieces of information and fake images online. This is one of the most serious criminal adaptations. Again, they target young population because of the fact that they are vulnerable, they are psychologically dependent, they have a lot of shame, and they have a lot of fear. They produce sexual imaginary. Basically what they do is when they create this kind of relationship, they would actually ask these kids to actually send them images, which they would sometimes do, or they would use existing images using Gen AI to create fake ones. And then having them also perform sexual acts under threat. So it's asking for more and more and more. So it goes beyond the money. It goes beyond the actual, blackmail that they would go through. Exposure of nude, intimate, personal photos and videos. Imagine the trauma and threat that it creates, which ended up of these wonderful 3 young lads committing suicide. You want more? The problem is that young population is impulsive, is risk-taking. They are still forming their identity and their personality. So what they're looking at, they're looking for peer validation. So that means we as parents, they need to be in alert, because this is not about bruises, it's about digital harm that causes psychological trauma, which can lead to catastrophic incidents and results. So it's really important to have an honest, shame-free conversation with your children or your grandchildren. So an environment of trust needs to be trusted, and that's something that most families don't do and don't appreciate. So this is a personal tragedy and a social failure, and this is actually getting worse and worse and worse. Because we also feel that these people, these kids, because they know about technology, they live in the era of technology, they can protect themselves. That's totally wrong. This is Sewell, 14 years old. "Please come home to me as soon as possible, my love," Danny replied. "What if I told you I could come home right now?" Sewell asked. "Please do, my sweet king," Danny replied. Do you know what the problem is? Danny is a chatbot. What happened to Sewell, he took his dad's gun and shot himself because he believed that by shooting himself, he would be with Danny. Sewell was only 14 years old. I'm not going to go into the discussion of how he got the gun and all that. That's not part of this conversation. What I'm trying to tell you here is that by using an app for AI companionship, Sewell was in belief that he was dating, that he was in a romantic relationship with a bot, Danny, because he felt completed, he felt worth, he felt valued. Basically, what happened is because of the fact that at that young age you haven't developed fully your emotional and cognitive capabilities, you are vulnerable. So basically digitalizing companionship, and believe me, and I'm sure you've got grandchildren, children and all that, you can see they can be emotionally vulnerable, they can be isolated, they can be deprived of friends and all that. This emotional reciprocity is actually catastrophic, and we've seen that. So this is, again, goes back into the value of human interactions, where basically what happens is that these kids, what do? They confuse reality, intimacy, and emotional support via a simulated environment created by an online world, and particularly a digital app and a bot. So that's about harm, that's about commercial manipulation of emotional vulnerability, and it also leads to societal alienation. So basically, it's dangerous, it's really dangerous, and we've seen numerous cases of young people at any age, and again, I'm happy to discuss further all the work and all the regulatory and policy work that is happening in terms of not allowing children to have mobiles at school, or preventing young children to have access to social media. We can discuss about all that, but you can see the depthness of harm that all of this can cause. AI-generated kissing apps. That's a new trend. What happens here is that by using images, you can create via deepfake technology fake images of people kissing. One man and one woman, one man with another man, one woman with another man. And try then to prove that is not true. So what does this do? It actually weaponizes personal imagery. Why? Because first of all, there is no consent. So none of us has consent for this. It simulates intimacy, desire, or sexuality at any age and at any kind. It doesn't recognize age, it doesn't recognize social status, it doesn't recognize anything. But what is also scary here, and I'm going to use an academic term here, it's scary because it leads us to what we call a post-representational regime, where that means everything that happens online is deemed to be legitimate and it's deemed to be true. So the post-truth world that we're trying to live in is getting even more complicated and even more scary. So basically that means whatever you see, you would be accepting intimacy without consent. This is what it is technically. And also it can lead to abuse, it can lead to sexual deepfakes, and also it can lead to coercion, or even, the sextortion that we saw earlier. So that means we see a massive scalability of harm because of technology, distortion of reality, as I said, try to prove you're not an elephant, and most importantly, the creation of alternative fake realities. This is what is very, very difficult and very, very dangerous. So again, for young people in particular, but for every one of us, we have to be very careful, but also we have to understand that the boundaries between reality, consent, and selfhood are becoming way more blurry. Another very scary one is imposter scams. You receive a call, your daughter, your son is in danger, he or she, they had an accident, we are transferring to the hospital, they're in immediate need of money. Please go to the bank, blah, 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 blah. They even use deepfake technology so you can listen to the actual voice of your son, daughter, grandchild, and all that. This is very scary, and they're on the rise. So by using voice cloning technologies, they can do that, and it takes only 3 seconds of audio, for that to be generated almost forever. So what we see here, we see a replication of voice, which is a biometric, which is basically one of the basic fundamentals of trust infrastructure. Our voice, our human traits, because each of the voice is unique. And it creates an environment where deepfake technology using voice cloning is becoming indistinguishable from real persons. So that technically means that we see believable narratives, because when you hear this kind of voice, you would panic, you would feel scared, you would fear, you need to support. So you wouldn't think clearly, you wouldn't think, logically, you would think impulsively, and basically that is an emotional landmine. This is where scammers are actually putting their their work, to create this psychological landmine, to create this emotional landmine, and basically by weaponizing technologically the voice, what do? They create an erosion of digital trust. You want more? Unfortunately, there is more. A very famous scam strategy is what we call a pig butchering. This is more of a financial crime, but the reason why I'm putting it out there is because we've seen numerous cases of people losing their money. They invest in crypto, they invest in other types of Ponzi schemes, they invest in different types of potentially lucrative investment opportunities. This is done through normal chats, primarily Telegram. So here what happens in a very simple words that you build a relationship with someone who claims to be a legitimate investor, and then that person would ask you to start investing money gradually. So by building this relationship, you start small, you see some return of investment, then you sweeten yourself more, you start more. So basically what they do, the reason why it's called pig butchering is because they gradually start killing you. And at some point, even though you have built this relationship, you go and see the money is totally disappeared. So basically that means it's a financial crime, and victims suffer from a loss of funds and actually carrying out the scams as well. This is very, very tricky. These are the most, let's say, prolific or most interesting types of scams out there. Impersonation, a fake celebrity. I'm sure you probably have seen mainly on Instagram, big celebrities endorsing different types of investment opportunities, most of them fake, using deep fakes, or even politicians endorsing particular aspects which are also deep fakes. So manipulation of social thinking, manipulation of public awareness. Blackmail and extortion, we've talked about that with the unfortunate examples I shared before. Social media and romance, again, social media, it's really rooted in these kind of situations, and basically people can reach out to you and create this kind of fakeness around all that, and they use romance quite a lot, especially for psychologically and emotionally vulnerable populations. Upgrades and donations, we've seen situations where companies are seeking donations, but then what they do, they clone a particular website which looks legitimate, but behind that it's a scam center. So basically you may be called to donate, let's say, for the war in Gaza, but then that website looks legitimate, but is actually fake. And behind that you would see scammers would basically rip off your money. Fake websites, phishing and straightforward theft, receiving emails such as the one I showed you from ATO, click there, blah, 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 or you receive an email which looks legitimate, and then you click there, and then you've got an overflow of new windows opening up. Mistake has already been done. One of the most scary ones is employment offers and fraudulent employees. I wrote a piece last year at the Conversation about the rise of job scams. People who are looking for a new life, accepting job offers to go and work for another country, they end up having their passports confiscated and working for scam centers themselves. Especially in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in Laos, we've seen numerous cases of people being detained and basically being trained to become scammers themselves, having also their passport stolen. So imagine going for a new life and being asked, in order to get your contract, can you buy this computer? Or can you transfer this amount of money or this amount of crypto via this particular account and all that? Or you go there and then they basically detain you, take your passport, and you start working at a scam center. This is actually part of a more modern slavery discussion. Hacked social media, I've heard many times people having their social media hacked, which means they see pop-ups, they see different types of information out there that they haven't sent, or an overflow of new messages, or posting things on the walls of others without having done them themselves. That causes a lot of issues as well. Celebrity impersonation, that we discussed earlier with endorsements. Basically, they impersonate or a social figure to do what? To either create some sort of a friendship, which basically would you even believe that you would be a friend with a celebrity, but mostly to present opportunities, which are all, of course, fake. Real estate, this is actually a very big one, and it's also quite serious here in Australia as well. Offering to buy a very expensive property, they utilize different fake accounts using legitimate information, such as date of births, names, and all that. And then this is about Ponzi investment schemes. Employment, we discussed about this. This is actually getting very, very serious, and also illegal call centers. Imagine receiving a call as I received from Telstra or from Optus, from NAB, impersonating. This is very scary as well. These would be the type of criminals who would actually are behind all this, from hackers to cyber criminals, dark web vendors, fraudsters, human traffickers, tax evaders, terrorists, political extremists, and all that. So the puzzle is crazily complex. So what do? We have to do something. By doing something, we need to start, first of all, recognizing that there is an issue. And there are a few things we need to start recognizing, but we need to see the warning signs, first of all, and also the psychological impact of digital harassment. And again, this could be also replicated to fraud and other areas. The first thing you probably would see is behavioral changes, mainly withdrawal, avoidance, reluctance to go to school or social events, drop in academic or work performance. These are the most, let's say, standalone issues you would probably see and signs. The second one would be emotional reactions. Change in the mood, depression, anxiety, low self-esteem or self-blaming. The third one would be physical symptoms, sleep disturbances, headaches, stomach issues, changing in eating habits, either loss of appetite or overeating, and then online behavior. Deleting social media, being very secretive, so there is a lack of trust here. That's why the trust environment is very, very important as well. Receiving lots of messages, but also posting on messages which basically they can create harmful content. This is I would say, the warning signs, which we all need to be aware of, and specifically for our kids and for our youth. The psychological impact is massive. We can have panic disorders, depression, post-traumatic stress. You may have issues such as suicidal thoughts, and we saw that actually happening in these two examples, and also social withdrawal. So as parents, as professionals, we need to be in alert. But these are not only for young children, it's also for every one of us who has experienced a particular situation like this. What can we do practically though? There are a few things we can do. First of all, make sure you've got strong passwords. Don't use the same password across all your devices. Don't use the same password across all the websites you're in. And also classify the severity of, let's say, harm that it would cause from a particular website. You would never use the same password, let's say, for your bank account and your Facebook. You have to start thinking smart. Two-factor authentication. These are interesting tools that you can use using mainly your smart device, and now almost all organizations are asking for this kind of authentication. Regular software updates. If you have, let's say, different types of operating systems, make sure you do that. Your ransomware, your antivirus, make sure you create and have all these updates with the latest tools. Secure Wi-Fi practices. You would never go to a hotel, use your public Wi-Fi and go and check your bank account, for example, to do a transaction. always ensure that you use your personal Wi-Fi for sensitive activities. So really make sure that you do this cyber hygiene. And finally, be critical, be sensitive to what do you actually share online. If you're going on vacation, do you want to post on Facebook, hey, I'll be away for the next 2 weeks? Or do you want to put your personal information, such as, your home address, or your mobile phone, or your date of birth, or your bank account, or anything online? The online world is not to share everything. Oversharing is always harmful because you never know where these things can be used and by whom. Also, use reliable security software. It's really important to have updates across all your devices and make sure you know where your devices are. You are able to recognize phishing and scams, as I said, this particular email that I showed you from ATO, or this particular message. Take a step back. Don't rush. Don't think impulsively. Think logically. Make sure you know where your information is, especially from a backup. Our information is everywhere now, so make sure you've got a very secure place where your information is sitting. Monitor your financial and online accounts. Check. See, let's say, okay, need to see, do I see any weird transaction through my credit card? Or do I see any weird transaction in my bank account? Or do I see any weird charge from a particular company that I don't know? Monitor that. And use also secure messaging. For example, use different tools which can be deemed as secure. Now, honestly, I don't want to leave you scared, but I want to leave you with a reality that we live in a world where digital is everywhere. And us living in this world, we are part of this digital regime, this digital reality. Unfortunately, as I said at the very beginning, where we are as legitimate people, criminals are also there. And they use, among what I shared to you, even more sophisticated techniques to create harm deliberately, to post fake information, to blackmail, to try to create different types of hassle for you, which sometimes is also irreversible. So it's really critical, and I hope this presentation will probably put you in a little bit of a motion to start thinking and becoming more aware about the cyber threats and scams. You need to educate as parents, as grandparents, as young people. You need to understand the criticalities. So for example, use legitimate applications. Don't accept any kind of friend request. Don't start oversharing from day one. Be careful what kind of photos you add. Be careful what kind of information you put. Be careful who do you actually talk to. And see also different types of red flags. That's very critical. Trust your instincts. Is it actually true? Is it too good to be true? Does it make sense? If it doesn't make sense for you, probably it doesn't make sense at all. And also apply common sense, as I said. If you don't have a car, why on earth would you receive a message that you own and that you need to pay money for a toll? Or if you don't expect a parcel, why would the post office send you a message? So start thinking, more logically. As I said before, and this is my final point, our digital footprint is a gateway for us being hackable. So we are all potentially hackable, me, you, anyone. Probably, even me, I know my photos are somewhere. I'm sure I have probably endorsed scam, Ponzi investment schemes. I'm sure my details have been used for somewhere. Can I do something about it? Probably not, because part of what we do is exposing our digital lives through professional engagements, even like this. I'm sure photos that will be taken could potentially be used for many reasons, both good and potentially harmful. There is a lot of work happening from organizations and governments around the globe to control that. I think AI can help towards mitigating all these scams and all these situations, but also we need to make sure that we are responsible as human beings and as responsible consumers as well. So I'd like to thank you very much. I hope it was a bit informative. It wasn't too scary, but as an academic, as a researcher, and as an educator, I always want to make sure I give you the truth, not the truth that I believe, but the truth that is out there, and try to raise a bit of awareness. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. It was a great presentation. I found it a little bit scary, to be honest. Wow. Anyway, so food for thought, everybody. I would like to start a little bit of a question and answer session now. Dimitri is at our disposal to answer any question. So, questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, Dimitri, thank you very much for the presentation. You certainly scared most of us. I'm not sure the young ones, but and I'm very conscious of being scammed, of course. But what about the governments? What are they doing worldwide? I'm talking not only for Australia. Are they chasing their tails with this scamming and also the oncoming AI? Tell me, are they behind the 8 ball?
Yeah. Look, the problem with governments and regulation in general is that it always falls behind technological advancements. So basically, they're always trying to chase developments. In Australia, we have seen some very interesting work that has been happening from the Australian scams, center, anti-scam center, with a new policy around creating awareness, creating tools, but also allowing people to actually go there and register if they've been scammed, so we receive this information. Police is doing a lot of work, especially in relation to all this extortion or these online scams and all that. We also see a lot of work happening in terms of regulating dating apps and social media, both in terms of usage, but also in terms of who can have access. And there is a lot of discussion right now for children up to a certain age not having access to social media or even not being able to bring their mobile phones to school. Is this the answer? Probably not, but at least there is work happening on the one hand to understand the complexity of all these scams, but at the same time to try to prevent by raising awareness. We see cases, for example, that even a bank has managed to verify and complete a transaction which was fake. So then the question is whose fault it is. Is it the fault of the customer? Is it the fault of the bank? Can me as a customer request a refund from the bank? Will the bank put even more hurdles to be able for me to access my funds back? So it's a bit of a chicken and egg. There is no straightforward answer to that, but this is where I come back into we need to make sure that we are as diligent and as legitimate when it comes to our transactions. I've heard numerous times that, 70-year-old went and put all his, her, they savings into a crypto account. Gone. How stupid can you be? You don't know anything about crypto or any kind of investment. You don't even know how these things work. You've got your life savings. You trusted whoever and whatever, or even a crappy post you saw on Instagram or social media. You don't think, and what do you actually do? You just go out there and just put your money into a fake account. So where is the common sense? Because, again, people think impulsively, people are greedy, I must say that, and people are always scared from the fear of missing out. So probably fear of missing out shouldn't be part of our thinking any longer. Sometimes pushing back and staying slow makes us safer.
Any other questions?
I'd like to ask Professor, I'm very much interested about the subject of grooming. About grooming. It's very alarming, and I've been a teacher for a number of years, and used to do all these seminars every year, and I don't know if they do.
Can you maybe share a little bit with the audience what grooming is so they can understand?
Grooming is when
Your microphone?
Grooming is when an adult person trying to approach with different methods younger children.
Yeah. This is part of the sexual harassment, basically.
Yeah.
This is part of what I discussed, and grooming is definitely a part of it. Look, this is where the role of parents comes in and the role of teachers comes in terms of educating, in terms of keeping an eye, in terms of, when your child is very young, to have parental support, to have parental controls in the social media, know what your children are looking at. But also, as I mentioned before, the most important thing is to create an environment where your child can come and tell you that this is actually happening. Not them to be scared, to feel shame, to feel fear. Because if they don't, this is going to be actually perpetuate forever and forever and forever, and it will end up as to what these 3 kids did. They took their lives.
Yes, it's happening a lot.
It's happening a lot and will keep on happening because, as I said, especially young generations are the most tech savvy, but the most emotionally, psychologically vulnerable. And this is exactly what I said about online harassment. This is actually a crime, to go and, stalk or to groom someone who is very young.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Peter Manuel. I will not publish the messenger. Okay. Mark Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg. You know his story, don't you?
I know many stories. I think I assume what you're referring to, but please.
We're talking about Meta.
Yep.
We're talking about his Facebook being banned for a couple of days. The question does arise, it's not what we already know, it's what's around us digitally. I very much enjoyed what you put up, but can I say they're more advanced? And a perfect example is when the government is indirectly involved, and it's an example of the bank that you brought up as an indication is indirectly involved. And I had a very minor issue, minor fraction with a particular bank, got in touch with the bank, they gave me an email. The only problem is the email wasn't active.
Okay.
So the question does arise is, okay, fair enough, the government's reaction when it comes to these policies. We recently passed the Communications Act, not allowing children at the age of 16. You know about the Human Rights Commission, as to how much they were opposed to it.
Yeah.
I'm not human rights, but at the same time, freedom of expression, freedom of communication, freedom of discipline, independence, freedom to work.
Yeah.
It's all gone. So in your position, work government to government, how will you address these issues?
Well, as I said, it's not an easy answer. And as you can see, there is many complexities on the fact that on the one hand, you try to ban something, which then contradicts with what exactly you said about freedom of expression, freedom of goodwill, freedom of agency, and all that. I think, but we have to start from somewhere, right? We can't just let things just be like that because it is actually a worldwide West, sorry, how do you call that? Wild West, yes, thank you. A Wild West out there. So nobody has the answers, unfortunately. Because the problem is when we try to finally get some answers, the technology is already advanced, as you said very well. And many of these things that I've put out there, they're even more advanced happening on a daily basis. If you check, for example, every single moment you see a new Gen AI app, you see a new application that offers anything and everything, which has good cause, but at the same time, how can you ensure that it's not used for harm? Unfortunately, you can't. So governments, unfortunately, they will always be chasing the tail. Unless you live in a very authoritarian country where you can ban everything, but can you actually ban everything? Can you ban the human curiosity and the willingness to evolve? Is this evolution though? There's a lot of questions. I mean, I'll give you an example, and I know exactly where you're referring with Mark Zuckerberg. He said that basically in the future, AI will be your psychiatrist, will be your girlfriend, your boyfriend, will be your partner, will be your mentor and all that. that's in his mind. Is it in everyone's mind like that? If I would talk to you, probably you would think no. If I talk to a 12 or 13-year-old person who has been living all their life in this, probably they say, yes, I like that. So it really depends on the demographics. And I'll give you one final example. I was reading a piece today on Bloomberg. It said that one of the things that call center workers are struggling nowadays is to prove that they're human. How many of them they call, me, you, and us as customers, we challenge them, you're not human. Because what they do, they're trained to read a script, they're trained to be emotionless, they're trained to be simply there. But that is actually what a bot does. So then, they're being challenged, prove to me that you're a human. And it's not their job to do that. So we're living a type of dehumanization, which it's scary. But again, it depends who do you talk to, and it depends, and I've said that many times in many of my speeches, it depends, before we decide what kind of economy we want, it depends what kind of society we want to build in. And I think where we're heading is that we need a new social contract with technologies, not just AI, with every emerging technology. Responsibility and ethics is there, but probably it's not enough.
Parameters. They should.
Yeah, but still, they're not enough. They're not enough. And remember, we live in times where we've got multiple demographics, so that causes additional complexity as well.
Christine.
Thanks very much for the presentation today. My question to you is, I've got a 9-year-old son who's heavily involved in the internet, using Roblox, using YouTube, and I think I've got a semi-okay grasp of technology and how to regulate that, to check his browsing history, to delete it, to do all the things you suggested today.
Do you have parental?
I do.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. But given he's obviously going into that 10, 11, 12, he doesn't have access to social media yet. But
Does he have a smartphone?
No.
Okay.
No. I was wondering whether you could share any other resources for parents, or whether there's anything else that you think, aside from those parental controls, that could help us, and also help us to have the conversation with him.
For me, as I mentioned before, the main thing is to have a healthy relationship with your son, and create an environment where your son can talk to you openly, without feeling ashamed, without feeling afraid, and without you going crazy and panicking. As long as you've done this, and I'm not going to say that there was be no way that anything wrong could happen, but at least having a mitigation strategy is very important. Also, it's very critical, though, to create some sort of a mindset to your son around, it doesn't mean because others do it, you have to do it as well. Because what young people do, they see their classmates at school, oh, he, she, they has a new smartphone, why don't I have one? Or he, she, they parents allowing him to do this, why don't I do that? And then it goes into self-comparison, it goes into self-regulation, and then it goes into, fear of missing out. For me, this is the most critical, to create a safe relationship and a safe environment that your son can come to you anytime. But you ensuring that you have the oversight, but not in a way that you take away agency from your son, because that's not the way to develop.
Before Elias asks a question, any other questions? Something of the last question.
I've got one after.
And there is one more there.
Okay, 1, 2.
Actually, when we spoke about Meta, I just want to bring this point to your attention. When I posted this event on the AHEPA website 2 or 3 times, and kind of promoted on the website, we actually received, supposedly from Meta, that this should be put down, and it was unlawful and all those things. Now, I didn't bother doing it because obviously I took it as being a scam or some sort. I couldn't see anything wrong with what we posted. Obviously, we're talking about against scammers, But it was interesting that we received not only once, probably half a dozen times. Now and again.
I think probably what happened, I mean, the only reason why I would think it would be legitimate if they would basically pick the word scam and cyber threat as
Yes,
maybe, but still I don't think it would be legitimate. Yeah.
But I took it as scam,
Yeah,
so I didn't
yeah,
actually reply.
yeah.
It's apparently coming from
Yes,
that.
I'm not surprised.
Okay.
Yes.
The other thing I want to say personally, what I have found, that as you mentioned before, from the NAB or the APO or the post office, if you actually just touch on or click on the email address that it's coming from and open that, it'll actually identify itself. Then you can judge whether it is authentic from the post office, because the email address cannot be the same. It will be something different.
Here.
Now, well, that's the question I want to ask. Is that dangerous if we click on that email to open it like that? That's intentional. Because that would have been IPO.
I'm not sure it would be. This would be the most tricky one.
Yeah.
But this would be more of the red.
Click on that one.
Yeah.
But the
This would be
email
more of the red flag
Yeah.
that there is something wrong here.
Yes. But that doesn't. You're not
Probably not, but you never know. Probably not though. But this would be the most scary one.
I found that is the simplest.
Yeah.
What you can actually
Yeah.
identify what is what.
True.
This is a scam. You delete it.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Dimitri, I'm going to ask you a provocative question.
Sure.
And I'm going to ask you to wear your geopolitical hat now.
Okay.
What we've been discussing all this time about the individual being the target.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? What if it's mass? What if governments are aiming their own people?
Mm.
I think we saw a very good example of what happened recently between Israel and Iran. So I would like you to...
Are you referring to the fake videos of the pilots on
Yes,
TikTok?
that's right.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
that's exactly right.
Yep.
So what is the implications of mass deep faking people at a level where politicians or governments want to drive the people
Yeah.
into a certain direction?
Yeah. Well, imagine election manipulation, John. Imagine hatred among countries. Imagine creation of narratives that don't exist. All of this is part of a disinformation, and disinformation basically it's about this is to manipulate common awareness and manipulate the opinions of each one and every one of us. And let's not forget also something else, that where do we actually receive this information from? Young people in particular, where do they get informed? TikTok, Facebook, Instagram? Who reads newspapers anymore? Who reads, legitimate news channels? So all of these are actually infesting the sources where majority of the population would go and look at. So for example, why would you go and trust a Facebook post more than a post from Financial Times? So let's not forget also, it's not about the actual information itself, but it's about where does this information is being disseminated. And as you saw in that video, which looks amazingly realistic, where it was first published on TikTok. Where is most of the population receives the news from? TikTok. You know what is also very scary, now that I mentioned about TikTok? All these young people who deem themselves as influencers. They go out there, they test products, they do that. They're not even 18, they're not even 15. And their whole life is around this virtual world. Instagram is the same. You see all this amazing stuff that they're posted, but if you take a step back, there is so much sadness and there is so much isolation around that. So it's exactly right. The disinformation, I think, is the new disease nowadays, and it's going to get worse, unfortunately.
And the last question.
Dr. Dimitri, thank you very much. So when the internet emerged, it was very simple technology. You didn't really need passwords at one stage. In my career, I have access to numerous financial institutions, other sites, and I need to manage a range of passwords, then second verification, authentication, blah, blah. I'm kind of losing track.
Me too.
To some degree, I'm relying on Chrome's password protection facility.
Or password manager.
Or password manager. There's a couple of questions here. How reliable is that in terms of being protected? Because
so you're outsourcing trust. You are outsourcing trust to a third-party vendor. Yeah.
And then, do you have any suggestions on how to manage? Last time I checked on my spreadsheet, which was password protected, and this is a spreadsheet that I keep all my passwords on, usernames, etc. I had over 300.
Wow.
And I try to be scientific on how to manage it. But
I would delete that, to be honest.
Right, so yeah, if you can give me some.
Look, for me, by default, you are outsourcing part of your digital identity and digital security to a third-party provider such as Google through Chrome. I would trust that more compared to having a spreadsheet. What I would also probably trust is when you use your smartphone to have face identification, which is another type of using biometrics. Some also computers or smartphones have also fingerprint. Look, none of this is 100% secure. There is always a potentiality of being hackable. But they're even more secure if you use a password which can be easily, guessed, or using these spreadsheets. I think we're moving also into a space where there are going to be other ways, such as a zero trust mechanisms, where you don't actually need all these passwords, but we're not there yet. And this is something I think lots of companies are looking at. How do we manage this identity verification process, which is a massive burden for organizations? But I think, and Felipe, I'll just say something, the final comment. I think we're moving into a phase now, though, that we need to create tools to prove that we are humans. Because how will you know if someone calls you and you say, hey, I'm Philippos, how do I know that Philippos is Philippos and is not a bot? So what kind of tools and codes I need to create with Philippos or with any Philippos or Yannis to say, okay, Felipe, that's me. But a bot can do that as well. So I think this is where we're heading. We're heading into some sort of an era where proving that you are human, unfortunately, is going to become the new norm. And as you saw with the example of the call center workers, they have to prove that they are humans, they're not bots. And people don't buy that. Because this is how they are trained, to be emotionless, to be there and to read a script. That's what exactly a bot would do, it would be trained for. A final example, there is now a question for us as academics to be able to teach in other countries, but using hologram technology. Basically, me, I could be projected to anywhere in the world as a hologram. So basically, they would see how I walk, how I express myself through a hologram. But at the same time, they can use my voice lecturing in the country's local language. So for example, I could be in Dubai and lecturing in Arabic. How do I know? I don't speak Arabic. How do I know that what the hologram is saying is true and is what I would say? And what if at some point the algorithm will be so better trained, having everything from me, maybe they don't need me anymore. So what happens? As you can see now, lots of companies are making people redundant for AI reasons. How do they report that? What kind of protection they have? They train the algorithms and then they say, oh, I don't need you anymore, I've got the algorithm. So you see there is more and more coming out there, and this is only a small part of the world we're going to be living in. Unfortunately, this is the challenging and the bitter part, but definitely emerging tech and AI in particular has a lot to offer, has many, many amazing opportunities. It's just probably as humans, we tend to be more in the greedy and in the illicit part rather than a legitimate one. So maybe all this is part of us to rethink a little bit of our presence, but really, please protect your digital footprint. That may be the final message I would like to give you.
Perfect. Thank you, Dimitri. Thank you very much.
Yanni.